Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, at least 3 UN peacekeepers and at least 12 demonstrators are killed in escalating anti-UN protests in eastern DR Congo. Unrest spread from Goma to Beni and Butembo, with crowds attacking the MONUSCO mission and accusing it of doing little to tackle regional threats. Also, French President Emmanuel Macron says that his country will open colonial archives on Cameroon to shed light upon the painful era. He's in Yaounde at the start of a tour of Central Africa aimed at further resetting relations with the continent. And the Queens of African football return home to a regal welcome. South Africa's Banyana made history by winning the Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Morocco over the weekend. But first, at least 3 UN peacekeepers and 7 protesters have been killed in Butembo in eastern DR Congo on the second day of anti-UN protests. About 50 were injured in clashes around the base of the UN MONUSCO force after hundreds of angry demonstrators took to the streets on Tuesday. Protests in the city of Goma on Monday had already left at least 5 dead. Clément Bonnereau has the details.
Anti-MONUSCO protests have now spread to several towns and cities across eastern DR Congo. Clashes broke out on Tuesday in Butembo, the third largest city in North Kivu. Demonstrators were dispersed by local security forces after shooting at the UN peacekeeping force with weapons they snatched earlier from Congolese policemen. Several peacekeepers were killed, as well as several protesters. Many were also injured in the attack. In Goma, tension was also high this Tuesday on the second day of demonstrations. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets, once again gathering around a MONUSCO warehouse and demanding that the UN force leave the country immediately. They accused MONUSCO of failing to protect civilians against armed groups. On Monday, demonstrations quickly got out of control with the ransacking and looting of MONUSCO offices in Goma.
Clément Bonnereau there for us. Now, on a trip to Cameroon, French President Emmanuel Macron has promised to open the archives on colonial rule in the country and call for historians from both nations to look into the uncomfortable and painful truths about the repressive period. This week, several Cameroonian politicians called on France to recognise crimes committed during the era. Macron met with Cameroonian President Paul Biya whilst on the first leg of a 4-day tour of Central Africa in the hopes of resetting relations with the continent.
4 days to convince and commit in a strategic but also crucial visit to Central African states. As he meets with President Paul Biya in Cameroon, Emmanuel Macron insists that it's Russia's war in Ukraine that has shaken up global food supplies.
Some tell us that the European sanctions are the cause of the world food crisis. These are absolute lies, totally false. Food has become Russia's weapon of war.
Soaring inflation is on its way. There are difficulties with transportation and people are anxious.
Macron's visit comes as Russia's foreign minister is also travelling across Africa. Sergei Lavrov is seeking to strengthen ties and convince that Moscow isn't to blame for the current war and food crisis. Few African nations have condemned the invasion of Ukraine. Many already had strong links with the Kremlin.
I say this calmly, but particularly on the African continent, I hear too much hypocrisy when it comes to calling a war and naming the ones who started it. And yes, I'm aware that there is diplomatic pressure.
But these ambitions come at a time where France's influence faces steep competition from China and India, while anti-French sentiments towards the former colonial power have risen in parts of the continent. Macron has nevertheless restated France's commitment to help fight jihadist groups at a time when French troops are pulling out of Mali after falling out with the country's ruling junta, which has forged ties with the Kremlin. A trend that Macron hopes he can begin to reverse in his first trip since winning re-election, as he continues his tour in Benin and Guinea-Bissau.
Tunisia's president said that the country is moving on from despair to hope after Monday's referendum aimed at delivering a new constitution that gives vast unchecked powers to the presidency. Kais Saied said that it's the only way forward out of economic and political turmoil. His critics say that it's a return to autocracy. And Dahilia has more.
A huge victory for the Yes camper here in Tunisia, tainted, however, by the low turnout. Either way, this referendum has left Tunisian society more divided than ever. On the one hand, there are the supporters of President Kais Saied and his project to reshape the Tunisian constitution. They say that the current constitution spreads power too thin, and they believe that this new constitution is the only way to get Tunisia out of its economic mess. On the other hand, there are those who point to the fact that this new constitution removes virtually all the checks and balances on the office of the president, potentially putting Tunisia back on the path of a dictatorship and undoing years of democratic progress. Looking ahead then, huge challenges facing Tunisia and in the months and years ahead. How to unify a bitterly divided country and how to fix a broken economy.
There were more anti-military protests in Khartoum on Tuesday. Near weekly unrest and deepening turmoil have rocked Sudan since Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan led a coup last October, upending a transition to civilian rule following the 2019 ouster of President Omar al-Bashir. And Burkina former President Blaise Compaoré has apologised to the family of his murdered predecessor. A military court found Compaoré to be complicit in the 1987 murder of Thomas Sankara and sentenced him in absentia to life imprisonment last year. Sankara's death happened during the coup that brought Compaoré to power. He ruled for 27 years before fleeing to Ivory Coast during an uprising in 2014. Despite his conviction, he briefly returned from exile for a few days this month to take part in a summit of former presidents hosted by the ruling military junta. And William Ruto was the only candidate to turn up for his presidential debate on Tuesday and says that shows that he is the only man for the job.
Didn't quite get to down to the real manifesto issues. I would have hoped that my competitor would have been here so that Kenyans can have the benefit of looking at both sides. Unfortunately, and it is understandable, that there is only one plan in this election, the Kenya Kwanza plan. The other side have sketches, and that's why they are not here.
Well, several presidential debates were held in the run-up to August 9th's elections. The four candidates running for president were set to face off and sell their manifestos to voters during the last leg of the elections, but candidates kept on dropping out. Our correspondent in Nairobi tells us more.
The issues surrounding the debates have been discussed since the beginning of July, with Kenyans not being sure of which candidate will show up for the debates and which one will not show up. Now, Deputy President William Ruto had said on the 2nd of July that he will not attend, citing media bias, but less than a week ago, he confirmed his attendance. George Ojakoya of the Roots Party also said on Tuesday that he will not participate in the debate unless he is on the same podium with all the presidential candidates. When the debate started at around 5:30 p.m., Ojakoya was nowhere to be found, and the host confirmed that he will not participate. Now, former opposition leader Raila Odinga also said on Sunday that he will not be participating in the debate and said that he will be hosting a town hall in one of Nairobi's low-income areas, Jericho, and the town hall was later on postponed, but he still insisted that he will not participate in the debate.
South Africa's female football champions arrived back home on Tuesday after having won the Women's Africa Cup of Nations over the weekend. They returned to crowds of jubilant fans eager to catch a glimpse of their heroines. Kemi Nedlick tells us more.
It's a heroine's welcome. And these are the women of the hour. South Africa's female football team returning victorious from the African Cup of Nations. This is South Africa's first Women's Africa Cup of Nations win. The team beat Morocco 2-1 in the final on Saturday. Triumph has been a long time in coming. South Africa had finished runner-up 5 times. The fans greeted the team with cheers, singing and dancing. As well as a win for the country, this victory could also be a win for gender equality. The president of the South African Football Association pledged to work on ensuring female footballers get paid the same as their male counterparts.
We are going to meet with our national executive to address this question. And I hope that other codes will follow SAFA in addressing gender disparity when it comes to remuneration and bonuses. So while we celebrate, we must also recognize there are challenges that we are ready to meet.
For these women, AFCON could be just the beginning, as winning the tournament qualifies them to compete in the Women's Football World Cup next year.
And a massive congratulations from us here at Eye on Africa. That is, though, all we have time for. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care.